Hi, I'm Sean Von Toggen. I'm the president of ProCyc. We're about to install a new built-in studio at ProCyc headquarters. So one of the great things about ProCyc is that you can basically build a cyc wall anywhere. We've got our freestanding systems if you have no walls whatsoever to build in your cyc. But if you do have walls you can build into, it's always going to be less expensive and provide a great studio. So what we're going to show you here is that we've got two different basically stages of walls that you could build into. Over here we've got a standard sheetrock wall. So if your studio has basic sheetrock walls, then we're going to show you how the installation procedure for that. If you are doing new construction, or say you are in a warehouse or studio space that just has cinder block or concrete walls, we're going to show you basically how you can do this from just basically building a stud wall in front of the concrete or cinder block wall and how you would install the cyc there. So the first thing we're going to do is show you how to prep the modules, and then we're going to get started installing it onto the walls.
The first thing we want to do is prep the modules by sanding them. We strongly recommend using an electric sander and 60 grit sandpaper. Now you want to make sure to sand the entire surface of each module as well as around the sides and the flanges. This will create better paint adhesion. This will also ensure that the joint compound on the seams will adhere as well. At ProCyc headquarters, we've decided to use a expanded corner configuration for our built-in studio. It's where we take the standard 90-degree corner and put a flat expansion in between the two parts of the corner. So we have a 45-degree corner, then a 4-foot flat module, then another 45 degrees to complete the corner. We always recommend that whenever possible to use the expanded corner configuration for several reasons. The main reason being that it just presents so much better to the camera, creates that infinity effect from all angles, much better than a standard 90-degree corner. Now you'll want to refer to your written instructions, which detail all the different types of tools you will need for your cyc installation. So we're going to assemble the legs first. Basically, you'll want to make sure that the leg, the upright part, is installed onto the foot, which is the bottom support, on the inside of the flange and resting on the bottom of the flange. After that, we're going to attach the diagonal brace. And finally, we're going to attach the second upright to the lower part of the leg with the steel insert. Now, before tightening the legs onto the insert, we're using a carpenter square or some kind of straight edge to make sure that the two pieces of legs are completely flush and vertical before we tighten. The final step we're going to do is attach the 2x5-inch steel flanges to the leg. Now refer to your written instructions as to which holes you're going to put them on, but we're going to go ahead and put those on, and before tightening them, again, we're going to use the carpenter square to make sure that they are at a 90-degree angle protruding from the leg. So that's very important. Once the leg assemblies are complete, we are going to begin to assemble the entire corner module, and we're going to start with the bottom row. So what we're doing here is putting the left corner, as you're facing the cyc, it'll be the left corner module, attaching it to the 4-foot flat expansion of the expanded corner. And we're using drift pins to line up the holes and then insert the bolts. Now with the expanded corner, the leg is going to attach onto the back side, and so the diagonal brace is actually going to overlap the plastic flange a bit. So we are leaving out bolts from certain holes. Now counting from the top, we are leaving out the top hole. We're not putting a bolt in there. That's where the flange is actually going to go. And then we're leaving out 3 holes in the middle, which is where the diagonal brace is going to attach to the module. So if you're counting from the top, we're leaving out hole 1, then we're leaving out holes 9, 10, and 11. So once you've got all the nuts and bolts and washers ready to be tightened, you're going to want someone on the face of the modules to either use just their hand or use some kind of a straight edge to make sure that the front part of the seams are as flush as possible before you do any of the tightening. This will really help when you start doing the mudding of the seams. Now as we bring the leg up to attach it to the modules, it's extremely important that it is attached to the correct side of the flange where the modules are connected. You want to look down towards the bottom of the cyc and make sure that the plastic flange where the modules connect is not resting on top of the foot of the cyc. So you want to make sure that the flange of the modules goes to the side of the flange on the foot. Now you want to leave about 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch distance between the back of the top flange and the upright of the leg. As you go up the leg, we will decrease that distance. This helps the cyc kind of lean back a little bit, which actually helps make sure it's not leaning over the corner, which could create shadows. It's also very helpful to clamp the module to the diagonal brace down below. That will help keep it stabilized as you drill through the top piece. We are going to drill using the 9/32 inch drill bit through the hole in the tab, through the plastic. And there's actually 2 holes in the tab, but we're going to drill the top one first, then insert the bolt and washer just like you did all of the other holes and tighten that down. Then we're going to drill through the second hole and tighten that one down. Next, we're going to go down and attach the diagonal bracing to the module. So there's 3 pre-drilled holes in the brace. We're going to leave that clamped and drill using the same drill bit through the metal brace into the tabs, and then go ahead and attach that with the bolt, nuts, and washers just like every other hole. Once that's done, we're going to take the 3rd piece of the bottom row of the corner and attach that to the other side of the flat panel. Using the same procedure, we're going to use drift pins to line up the holes, insert the nuts and bolts, but before tightening them down, we are going to again make sure that the seam is as flush as possible, and then we're going to tighten all the bolts down and bring in the second leg piece to complete the bottom row of the corner assembly. Now that the legs are attached to the bottom row of the corner, we're just going to move that out of the way and start assembling the top 2 rows. Now to make it a little easier, we're going to go ahead and assemble each column together on the floor before we lift it up into position. So we're going to start with the middle panel, and since they're both flat, one way to make sure that they are flush is to put the pieces face down on the ground and go ahead and bolt them together right here. Once we've got those bolted together, we're going to move that out of the way and go ahead and do each of the corners. Now they're not flat, so we're going to put one on top of the other, just like we did the first 2 pieces of the bottom row. And using our drift pin to line up the holes, we're going to put all the nuts and bolts in. And then of course, as we always do, we're going to make sure that the seams are flush as possible before we tighten them. So now we're going to bring the corner back out and start lifting the top 2 rows into place. We're going to start with the left column, and once that's attached, we're going to work our way towards the other side. Now we're going to lift the module up into place, making sure that the steel insert tabs are on the same side of the flange as they are down lower. Now drift pins are definitely going to be your friend at this stage. Because the 2 pieces are kind of up in the air, it's going to be a little bit more awkward and prone to wobbling, so use several drift pins and someone to hold it in place as you insert the nuts and bolts. And again, before you tighten anything, make sure to have somebody using a straight edge or even their hands or fingers to make sure that things are as flush as possible. And when you attach the 2x5 steel flange brackets to the modules, you want to make sure they're on the same side of the flange of the module as down below. And you're going to also do the same procedure as far as drilling through the top hole into the brackets and attaching the top one before you do the second hole. And this is what it looks like from the back side once all the modules are attached onto the leg assemblies.
Okay, so now we have got the corner to our built-in system built. What we're going to do now is slide it back into the corner between the 2 walls and verify exactly where these uprights, the edges where the screws are going to meet the wall. Now in a perfect world, the corner to every room is 90 degrees, but we know that's not the case. Sometimes it can be off by a degree or 2. So the edges don't always hit the wall at the exact same space, which is the entire reason that we build this first. Slide it back to the wall to verify where it meets the wall. So at that point, we're going to measure where it hits the wall and find the stud on either side of the edge. We're going to cut the sheetrock out and replace that with a furring strip of plywood, the same thickness as your sheetrock, and that is what the edges are going to be screwed into. Now this wall over here represents a wall that's your normal studio sheetrock wall that you already have. Of course, this wall back here would be like new construction or a cinder block wall that you built studs in front of. That will actually be easier. You'll be able to see exactly where the studs are on either side of where this edge meets the wall, and we'll go ahead and put up the furring strip and go from there. So just didn't want there to be any confusion because we've got the 2 types of walls. So we're going to do this type of wall first, Then we'll do the furring strips on this wall, and then we'll do the rest of the cyc.
Now, as I mentioned, we are sliding the corner back into place. We're going to position this as accurately as possible against the corner, measuring on both sides to make sure that we're contacting the wall equidistant from the corner on both walls. Then we are going to draw a line right where that is on both walls, and we're going to slide it back out. Once the corner is removed, we are going to find the stud on either side of that line. We know that's where it's going to contact the wall, so we're going to need to put a furring strip in place of the sheetrock that we're going to attach the module to. So we're going to find the stud on either side, draw a line, a vertical line where each of those studs are, and we're going to cut those out down to about 34 to 38 inches above the floor. Then we're going to do the same thing horizontally. We're going to make a line right in between the 34 to 38 inch level. Make that a parallel line to the floor all the way out to the edge as far as our cyc is going to go. We're going to snap a chalk line, one at 38 inches, one at 34 inches, and we're going to cut that piece of sheetrock out using some kind of fine tool. We're using a powered multi-tool here. You could also use a sheetrock knife. You could use a skill saw with the depth adjusted to the depth of your sheetrock, usually a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch. Once the sheetrock is removed from both the vertical and the horizontal strips, we're going to take some pre-cut furring strips, which we've already measured out before, and we're going to replace that into the hole that the sheetrock has left and attach that onto the studs with drywall screws. We're going to do the same thing with the vertical one, and that will be the width of the hole that you've left, so it will attach on either side to each stud.
Okay, so we've just completed installing the furring strips of plywood in this the sheetrock wall, so your normal studio wall. If you were going to just leave your standard one layer of sheetrock on, this is the time when you would go ahead and attach the cyc to the wall. Now, we always recommend using 2 layers of sheetrock if possible. It's just much better for sound deadening, especially if you're doing video and you're going to have sound in your studio. It provides a much better result, deadens the sound quite a bit. So we're actually going to put a full other layer of sheetrock on top of this, and then we're going to put the cyc on after that. Now, this wall represents the new construction wall where we have exposed studs. There's no layers of sheetrock yet. We know where the cyc, the corner terminates at the wall, so we know in between which 2 studs we want to put the furring strip. So we're going to put the vertical furring strip on, then the horizontal one that starts at 34 inches, and it's about a 4-inch strip up to 38. And after we put on the furring strips, we're going to go ahead and put the sheetrock, the first layer of sheetrock around the furring strips, then put the second layer of sheetrock on top of all of that, and then we're going to put the cyc in. Both walls will be double layers of sheetrock, and that's the way we want it. Okay, so we have both walls with 2 layers of sheetrock on now. The furring strips are on the first layer, and then we put a second layer of sheetrock on over it for extra sound deadening. We're going to be using this studio for video, so deadened sound is really important. So what we're going to do now, since both walls are completely prepped and sheetrocked, is we're going to go ahead and bring in the corner that we assembled earlier, slide it back in. We're going to make sure that it's absolutely perfectly equidistant from the corner on both walls, and then we're going to go ahead and screw it in, and then we're going to assemble the right wall coves and the left wall coves and slide those in, get those bolted in, and we'll be ready to go for some mudding and painting.
So to make things easier on us when we measure to make sure the cyc is equidistant from the corner, we put a vertical line at 7 foot 8 inches out from the corner. We knew that was a little bit farther than where the cyc would attach, and we just made sure that each side of the cyc was the same distance from that 7 foot 8 mark on both sides. Now, different systems have different measurements, obviously, but with a Super 3 expanded corner, we know that this is about the correct measurement. So now that we know that the cyc is in the right position, we're going to go ahead and attach it using just drywall screws, going from the bottom part of the corner all the way up to the top. Now, before we start assembling the pieces for the right wall and the left wall, what we're going to do is measure from the floor up to the top edge of the cove, and we're going to take that measurement and then go all the way out to the end of the wall and measure the same thing from the floor to the wall, and then draw a chalk line between there. When we do lay in the wall coves, they don't have to exactly match the line. The most important thing is that the coves are flush at the floor and at the wall, but this line will help kind of give us a guide as to where it should be. We're gonna go ahead and attach all of the modules together. Now on this particular cyc, means we've got 4 modules to put together on this left side and 3 on the right side. Now we can put 2 together, one on top of the other, just kind of like we did in the corner. So we're gonna go ahead and on the one that's 4 pieces, we're gonna go 2 at a time, fasten them together just like we did the first ones where we use the drift pins, make sure they're flush, and we put them together 2 at a time. Then we're gonna lay them on the ground, face down, and join them together at the center. Generally, the 2 sides will create a flush seam at the front, but we wanna make sure of that before we completely tighten everything together. So now we've got all of the floor module coves bolted together, ready to go onto the wall. We are gonna go ahead and start with the left wall, which is the longer wall. We're basically just gonna tip it up into place. We're using sandbags on the ground to kind of keep it from sliding forward. And then we're gonna kind of use that chalk line that we snapped on the wall as a guide. We're gonna go ahead and just put in 1 screw, kind of as a holding screw to keep it from sliding forward. Now behind the cyc is obviously not gonna be a very large space, so you probably want the smallest person in your crew back there, just using the drift pins and the bolts and nuts. Basically, you're gonna do the exact same thing that you did. Have somebody on the front to make sure that the seam is as flush as possible before tightening it. So once the cyc wall has been attached to the corner, from behind we're gonna go ahead and attach the front to the wall. So basically we're gonna start at the corner, going out horizontally with drywall screws again, and attach it to the wall. Then we're gonna repeat on the other side. So once the wall coves have been completely attached, we're gonna go ahead and attach the cyc to the studio floor. So we're gonna start in the center, start drilling the holes and work out towards the sides. Now, depending on whether or not your studio has a concrete floor or a wooden floor, refer to our written instructions as far as what kind of drill bits and screws you'll want to use. If you're going to be painting your floor, you're going to want to put a screw in every single one of the pre-drilled holes. If your cyc is going to be used as a green screen and you're using ProCyc's Virtual Green ProMat Studio flooring, you only need to put a screw in about every 4th or 5th hole, just enough to keep it from moving, as the ProMat is actually going to overlap the lip of the cyc by 1 or 2 inches. One quick bonus tip to reinforce the front edge of your cove modules and to help prevent the mudded seams between the modules from cracking if someone were to accidentally step on it is to pack some dry mortar mix right up under the coves up to a height of maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches. Once that's in there, we're going to spritz it with water, and once it dries, it will really reinforce the stability of the bottom edge of your cyc and prevent it from flexing, which could cause the mud and paint to crack at the seams. We always recommend that whenever possible to use the expanded corner configuration for several reasons. It lights much easier, and it also handles sound much better. With a 90-degree corner, you often get that parabolic effect with sound bouncing straight out of the corner. With the expanded corner, you don't get that at all.
So there you have it. We've installed the Super 3 EZ with an expanded corner at the ProCyc headquarters in Clackamas, Oregon. We've got a 20-foot 2-inch wall on this side, 24-foot 2-inch wall on this side, and we're at 12 foot high. This cyc is ready to be mudded. We always recommend being professionally mudded to get that, to float out all the seams and get that perfect seamless effect, and then painted. So I hope this was helpful to you, and of course you can always call us with questions about your installation or your cyc needs.